Senator Reiser, do you have the new amendments by Senator Mills? Yes, we have. Is that these? Okay. Senator Reiser again calls Senate Bill 499 with Senator Reiser, enactment entitled 39, relative to issuance of debt by political subdivisions.
All right, so Senator Reiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. We bring it back again. Remember, you keep saying this rhetoric of it, it's almost like it's being humorous, and it's not a humorous situation that you're saying. I say again, as I said in my opening statement, put yourself in the situation that you're owed $300,000 and they refuse to pay you, and you're going to simply just sit back and think it's fine as long as it's not you, as long as it's not your neighbor. Well, when you vote for these amendments to exempt somebody out, when your neighbor, your daughter, whoever the constituent one might be, well, you're going to have to show them this piece of paper where you told them and said, I don't think you should be paid. I said no, and I agree. Senator Mills, you can bring all these up here and say and agree and tell me I don't think the constituents, the people of Louisiana, should be paid. Let them go broke. So I'm looking forward to the amendments. Bring them on.
All right, sir. All right, so yield any questions before he brings the amendment, or you want him to bring the amendment first?
I'll take the question.
All right, so Senator Walsworth, you had a question?
It's hard to believe that they're against this.
Senator Walsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, in you bringing this bill, these are not the tort kind of bills in which issues in which you have a citizen going down a country road and all of a sudden there seems to be a accident that happens. They wind up suing the municipality or the village of whatever, or maybe even a parish. That's not what these bills are. These are normally the kind of bills in which a municipality or a parish sends out an RFP or asks for bids and then comes back. One of the contractors will win that bid. They perform the service that the municipality or the police jury had asked for, and then after everything is said and done, then that municipality or police jury says, well, I don't think I'm going to pay. Now, is this those are the kind of issues that you're talking about here, correct?
Correct. And if you'll follow right here, Senator Walsworth, on page 2, line 14, that a contractual obligation means a voluntary written agreement between a political subdivision, any person's entity who contracts to provide goods, services, or work on behalf of a political subdivision as an independent contractor, including but not limited to any professional service, contract, consulting agreement, or procurement contract.
Wouldn't you say that these are obligations that the local governmental agency knew that they were going to have? Wouldn't you say that?
That's a very accurate statement. I'll go back. This is offer and acceptance that you've already taken into a budgetary consideration. You know it's coming up. It's not a tort, something that's unplanned, unmanageable. You can't budget for, something that's unknown. This is something you actually went and sought and agreed to, offers and acceptance, and it's not. The attorneys might correct, but you can have a verbal agreement. This is actually a written contract.
Senator, I guess my last comment may be this. Would you be surprised if I told you that I had a couple of my mayors, and you'll probably see that by them not opting out. They want to be in. They pay their bills. They think that this in the long run is going to be possibly good for them, that if there are municipalities and people who are not paying their bills, so that the ones that are paying their bills may wind up getting the benefit of this legislation.
I can see where that's possible. So if someone's abusing the system that is intentionally not paying, that could be a theoretical advantage. Another question, Mr. President?
Senator Amadei? Now, at the time they're going to have to, you want them to pay this, they have to go through, got to get a final judgment. Didn't you say that? That's in the bill I read?
Correct. We amended that in committee where it's upon a final, non-appealable judgment.
So that would take actually a couple years probably before that would happen. What about, here's one of my concerns though, what about any other kind of judgments that the parish would get against it, or the city or the town? That wouldn't be a contract. It might be for somebody getting hurt or something, run over by a parish truck?
It is not applicable in that, Senator Amadei, go back because it's only written contractual agreements under a tort situation or something like that. That is not intended under this because, once again, that's something that you budgetarily cannot control.
And it doesn't allow them to go seize anything. It just allows them to, it prohibits the municipality or the government agency from not being able to borrow money or go in front of the bond commission.
And that's a very good point of this bill. It does not cease operation of a local government at all. They can continue going on doing their business just as completely as normal every day as they want to do, as long as it's not something before the bond commission. So it does not resolve, in a lot of ways, it resolves nothing. They can still say, I don't think so. And the point that Senator Amadei brought out, that the final judgment could take a couple of years, so more than likely, those members that have people that have judgments against you, more than likely the individuals will probably be bankrupt anyway. So, I mean, probably not going to have to pay them, maybe even upon that.
Senator Clayton, you had a question?
Senator Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Reiser, I certainly understand the frustration of not being paid on a debt, and that I've seen that, and I've actually had judgments against municipalities that I think are as valid as anybody else's judgment, whether it's contractual or not, and been told, stand in line and we'll pay you if and when we can. And I didn't like that very much, but I kept coming back to the idea that government is different and they provide different services than some other entity out there, non-governmental entity. I'm concerned about this issue of what happens when this goes into effect. How would entity be impacted by the inability to go before the bond commission? What would happen?
Yeah, be ineligible for any bond commission that comes through. If it was, say it was a capped outlay project, and then you come back, you would think maybe your I don't want to get ahead of you. I mean, I don't be asking your questions, but if it was an emergency, the IEB and emergency board, there's $20 million revolving fund there. I don't think there would be an issue on that because that's not embodying indebtedness. That's already inside the budget.
All right. So if I understand the things that municipalities and these other government entities go before the bond commission, they're going before them to put in water systems, to put in streets, to would they go before the bond commission to get money to buy fire trucks? Is that the type of things that they would end up in front of the bond commission for?
Every now and then you have something that's been frowned upon sometimes where you have like a fire truck that's put through capital outlay. That's not the normal acquisition method, or a police car, either one.
Okay. Well, that's where my concern comes about, in that I really don't like being paid on my judgments, and I really don't like getting in line and we'll pay you when we feel like it. That sticks in my craw. But when I think about, all right, is this going to impact the ability of the fire trucks to put out the fires in my neighborhood? Is it going to impact the ability of the police in my town? There's been a lot of questions about we need another prison. Is it going to keep us from building another prison? Is it going to contribute to our crime problem? I just want to know, where does that thing go? Is that an unfounded fear on my part, or is that potentially a legitimate concern?
I think it's somewhat reasonably unfounded. Does that sound kind of legal almost? Theoretically, you can go what if, and probably come up with some theoretical scenario. But it's the infrastructure that's already in place. The prison's already in place. Well, then you have a prison. We have other prisons in the state. You already have a police department there. That's not doing anything to this. I mean, that's not. They already got local taxes that's being rolled forward on that. So, I mean, they already have a taxing system and methodology to pay for that. So that's only if you go through and look at your ad valorem tax, you'll see a lot of these things listed on there.
All right. Well, I feel your pain and I understand your frustration, but I believe that it impacts these municipalities and governments on the ability to get their roads, their water, and the infrastructure that they have to have. Little guys out in Delhi that support me on my different bills might have issues with being able to get the services they need, but I appreciate that you're trying to take on the problem here.
And the final answer to that is that these were not obligations that were just all of a sudden came up. These were known budgetary. Certainly you would not enter into a contractual agreement for a monetary given year, a fiscal year, that you didn't have the money for. If that's the case, if you're entering into those kind of agreements, it only builds my case even stronger. I mean, if you're poorly running your parish or your municipality that weekly.
All right, Senator Adley, you had a question?
Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman, I should have thought of it when we were in committee, and I apologize to you. The only question I have, if they have to go to bond commission to borrow the money to pay the debt, but they cannot go borrow the money, they can't go to the bond commission, and by law they have to go to the bond commission, what happens?
Now, let me see if I got this clarified. They have an indebtedness that they're going, they made a contractual agreement, and in your scenario for $100, and they come to the bond commission asking for that. I don't know if you can appropriate to do that anyway already.
Here's the problem. Before local government can borrow any money, they have to go, and it doesn't have anything to do with bonds. Before they can even borrow money, they have to get approval from the bond commission. Let's assume that there was a case for $1 million. They legitimately didn't think they owed it, but they go to court. The court rules against them. They have to pay. But they don't have the money to pay, and they have to borrow the money to pay. They have to go to the bond commission to get approval for that. If we pass this like this, they can't go get the permission to borrow to pay, as long as the words any indebtedness is included in this bill. I thought you were directing it toward bonds and trying to get it bond money.
I don't disagree with that.
But the problem is the way it's drafted right now. If they had to borrow the money, a legitimate concern, if they had to borrow the money, they couldn't go to the bond commission and get permission to borrow to pay the debt. Did you know?
If that was the scenario, and it was limited and it was narrowly tailored to that, to address that, I would not be object to that amendment.
Well, I just simply would suggest to you where it says bonds, notes, or other evidence of indebtedness, if it's bonds you're directed out, you really ought to take notes or other evidence of indebtedness out. Because if you don't, and they actually have to borrow the money, they can never play because they can't borrow the money to pay. I should have thought about it in committee, and I didn't. I apologize to you, but as we're sitting here, I heard it.
And I follow your train of thought, but I want it narrowly tailored. Will it specifically say to pay for an indebtedness, where there's not left a loophole inside my bill where that there's just, it ends up being nothing.
If you leave the word bonds, I thought you were trying to stop them from borrowing money for their construction projects and so forth. The problem right now is the only way they can borrow money to pay the debt is go to the bond commission. That's not only is there a constitutional provision that protects them, then you have this other provisional law that requires them to go to the bond commission to borrow money. So I think legitimately it could happen to a municipality that they get in a dispute. They don't think they're wrong, but the court rules against them. And if they got to get the money, and they're going to have to go borrow the money somewhere, they have to get permission. And the way it's written right now, they can't even get the permission to borrow to pay.
Do you know of a scenario that's happened historically in Louisiana or not? Or
I guess I would reverse the question to you. I don't know of any situation yet where they have refused to pay. Obviously, it has happened, and it'd be good for you to list who we're dealing with.
Supreme Court cases, Barber Brothers Construction versus East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, final non-appealable $400,000. REA Construction versus Tangipahoa Parish, $200,000. Did not pay, final judgment. F.G. Sullivan versus East Baton Rouge Parish, $700,000, Supreme Court case.
Let's take one of the examples. Let's just take Tangipahoa, the good example. Tangipahoa Parish, $200,000. If they didn't have the cash on hand to pay the $200,000 and they had to borrow it to pay the debt, they couldn't go get permission to borrow the money. Am I correct?
In the bill that allows the debtor to okay them going.
Senator, they tell me there's a provision in there that allows the creditor to be able to go to the bond commission and ask for that. Martha, where's that? And I apologize to you, Senator, that not being astute that was eligible and in here now. But staff tells me it's addressed on line 17, continuing to page 2.
So they can receive approval from the creditor to go to the bond commission to borrow the money. Thank you.
Thank you for valid point, Senator. Mr. President, I see no questions.
Ready for amendments?
Move final passage.
All right. Do you have amendments?
Yes, sir, I have amendments. First set sent by Senator Mills is set number 2617. 2617.
All right, Senator Mills.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a continuation. We added on Orleans, and I think there was one other city we added, and we're keeping Livingston in. And, you know, I've been kind of joking about this, but, you know, one real example on this is all of a sudden you have this judgment, a hurricane hits, you can't even go to the emergency funding on this issue. So there's issues that it all sounds good in the laboratory, but in real life in these little towns, in these little parishes, in these big parishes, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. So I'd ask you to support the amendment.
Objection.
All right, so Senator Riser, you object? You want to state your objection?
Do you have a question? Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
Senator Walsworth, you want to ask him a question? Ask Senator Mills a question? Come on down.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Mills, I mean, is it your belief that we shouldn't pay what we're owed? I mean, you're a businessman, I'm a businessman. I mean, isn't that sort of the public, I mean, the right way to do things is to pay what you're owed? So I guess I'm going to ask you why, can you tell me what's your thoughts on and just saying, hey, no matter if you're government or private enterprise, you pay what you owe?
Well, then I wonder why we have bankruptcy from a personal standpoint, because when you have bankruptcy from a personal standpoint, you can erase a judgment. A municipality can't erase a judgment. So we all should pay what we owe, but sometimes you can't afford what you owe, and thus bankruptcy.
So the ones that you owe, what kind of thoughts are you saying? These are, according to the author, Chairman of Revenue Fist, what he is saying, these are judgments from an RFP or in which the municipality or local government knew they owed that. So tell me why they shouldn't pay something that they are in. Is it just because I mean, it's a good thing that they can? I mean, it sort of make me understand what you're trying to do here.
Well, we probably don't agree, so I don't know if I can make you understand. So I guess from what I'm trying to say is you have a municipality that maybe had a job and 90% of it was complete. 10% maybe was for retention. Maybe there's some problems with it, and I lost in court on the retention. Maybe I can't afford to pay it. Maybe it's another administration. But for all these parishes and all these governing bodies to see a problem with this new type of legislation, they're saying we want to opt out. We want to opt out. So it makes sense. If you want to be in it, and we'll see how it works. Maybe we'll join y'all later.
isn't it, in the author says 98% of those are, I mean, I didn't hear your parishes or my parishes in his examples. So I mean, do you think it's one of those cases in which, hey, do you think we're going down a sort of a dangerous road that says, well, maybe we don't have to pay, and look, we can still go about our merry way, and we just don't have to pay? Where do you think we're trying to lead our, as Senator Reiser would say, where are we trying to lead our kids to go?
Well, we're trying to do what you do when you beta test something. When you beta test something, you don't put everybody in it. So, you know, we think Senator Reiser's concept may make sense, but let's see how it does, and we might join y'all later.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, so, Senator Reiser, you want to ask him a question?
I have a question for me.
Senator, I'm going to just add your remarks there. You use different administrations, so you think it's all right if somebody else made the obligation and somebody else new comes in, we'll just kind of don't worry about it, or?
No, I think it's a good policy. I just don't think it works in the real world. If you have an emergency or you have a funding need that you maybe inherited from a long time ago, and you personally can get yourself out of this bind if you can't make it from bankruptcy. You don't give us that alternative in this scenario. So in the real world, you sometimes can mitigate that situation through bankruptcy. There's situations that these municipalities have a real fear in an everyday life and in an emergency situation. So what I think all these guys are saying is, we'll opt out of it, but if you like it, you keep your people in.
Did you know of the familiar IEB, the Interim Emergency Board, and that an emergency this bill would not even be applicable?
Well, my people are worried about it, and they said, look, it's your job, please get me out of here. And I didn't get a call from one person worried about this legislation other than my municipalities, my elected officials, and I'm doing the job they've asked me to do.
Last question. So you didn't get it? You didn't get any contractor that said, I thought this was a bad bill?
I didn't get any contractors even interested in it.
Senator Murray, you have a question on the amendment?
I guess I just want to ask you your opinion. We're getting ready to substantially change law, state law. And I listened to the case that Senator Reiser, at least one example, I think Senator Atlee was asking him a question, where this company is owed maybe $700,000 here in East Baton Rouge Parish. I'm told that they do millions of dollars worth of business, and they had a discrepancy over something, and so they were paid everything else. But I guess they must have had some dispute over $700,000. You think we should change this over something like that?
I agree with you.
All right, so on the amendment, Senator Kostelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. This isn't a question. This is just on the floor on the amendment. Members, this is going to get ridiculous here if we start opting out one parish after another. It's like a race to the courthouse. If the bill is bad, let's vote the bill down. But to opt out and say, okay, the rest of you, y'all go swim for yourselves, but we're going to get in a lifeboat. That's just not what we ought to do. We ought to have not only the common sense but the integrity to get up here and either vote this bill up or down and not try to opt out and like I say, race to the courthouse.
All right, so any further discussion on the amendment? Senator Reiser, you wish to speak on the amendment? You want to object? Go ahead.
Senator Kostelka made a good, valid point. Members, this is a matter of just keeping your word. I mean, everybody in here, I look around, and when you give your word on something here, if you tell somebody something, you're going to do it. When you go back home, I don't want my parish opted out. Caldwell Parish, if you give your word there, that means something. The rest of you don't believe that. If your mayors don't believe that, police jury don't believe that, so be it. But in Caldwell Parish, it means something to me. I object to this.
All right. Senator Mills, you have a right to close on your amendment. I'm sorry.
Senator Mills. Do you want to withdraw and put this in new session? Senator Mills sent out, what was the number? Senate Amendments 2617, he's got a new set that adds additional parishes. It's 2626. It's at 2626. So he withdraws 2617 and adds new parishes and sends out amendment number 2626.
All right, Senator Mills, you want to make sure you explain to the members what those new additions are.
Mary? Where's Mary?
Which one's
there? The last line.
Line 34, Mr. President, adds on Assumption, Ascension, St. James, St. John the Baptist, St. Charles, Lafourche, Iberville, West Baton Rouge, and Terrebonne. And members and Mr. President, I think what I said was perfectly clear. In a personal situation, you can clean up a bankruptcy if you can't pay your judgment. And these municipalities don't have that recourse. And it's not about paying, and it's about paying. The courts can even make a mistake. So we're saying from the LMA, the Police Jury Association, and everybody else is, please, we just want to opt out of this, and please consider us to be opted out, and I'd ask you to support the amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman has sent up an amendment to which there is objection. When machines are open, those in favor will vote yes, those opposed no. Mr. Secretary, open the machines, please. Senator Raza, no. Vote your machines, please. Vote your machines. Are you through voting? Senator Talva, yes. You through voting? All right, close them up. 25 yeas, 12 nays. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments, Mr. Secretary?
Next set of amendments sent up by Senator Morrell.
Senator Morrell, he waives.
Withdraws them. Next set sent up by Senator Nevers.
He waives.
He withdraws them. Next set by Senator Gallo.
Senator Gallo.
Senator Gallo is set number 2025. 2025 is one amendment. What? Which one? Okay, Senator Gallo withdraws that 2025 and sends up 2622. 2622.
2622. Senator Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, what my amendment would do is to opt out the parishes of Lincoln, Grant, Bienville, Jackson, Natchitoches, Rapides, Red River, Sabine, and Wynn. That's what it does. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, sir. Senator Ross, do you have any objection to these amendments?
Point of order.
All right, sir.
Point of order.
Go ahead, sir. Point of order.
Mr. President, it's my understanding it has to be done by population of the point of order instead of specified by parish.
I don't know what the law is on that.
Well, Senator, you're probably right. It appears after all these amendments on it, the bill now would apply to 2 counties in Idaho. So I'm not sure it makes a difference at this point, but you are correct. Technically, it should have been drafted with populations rather than that part.
No object. No, you're right.
Any further discussion?
Yeah.
You do object to the amendment, then?
Object because it's point of
All right, sir. Well, the courts generally rule on these things, Senator. All right, Senator Gallo, you want to close on your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask that you support the amendment, and if there are, after further discussions on it, if the bill gets out of here, we could always do it by population across the hall, but I've been contacted by local municipal governments asking to be opted out. I'd ask that you support me in supporting the areas that I represent.
All right, the gentleman has sent up an amendment to which there is objection. When machines are open, those in favor vote yes. Opposed, no. Mr. Secretary, open the machines, please. Vote your machines, please. Senator Raza, no. Senator Talva, yes. You through voting? All right. Senator Crow, yes. Senator Crow, yes. All right, close them up. 27 years, 11 days, the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments?
Next set sent up by Senator Clater. He withdraws them. Senator Charbear. Amendment sent up by Senator Charbear, set number 2136. Withdraw them. Senator Mills has got a set 2119.
Senator Mills, you got something else to exclude?
What did he say?
He's doing good in those precincts.
Okay, he withdraws those. Senator Gallo, 2149, you withdraw those? Senator Gallo? 2149 adds the parishes of Lincoln, Grant, Bienville, Jackson, Natchitoches, Rapides, and Wynn. You already did that?
All right.
Senator Martini withdraws. Senator Murray withdraws. Senator Heitmeyer withdraws. Senator Lon withdraws. Senator Gallo again. I guess he withdraws. And another one by Senator Gallo. We got one set by Senator Reiser.
Senator Reiser, you want to?
Set number 2620 by Senator Reiser.
All right. All right, Senator Reiser.
Members have objected, respectfully objected to Senator Gallo's procedurally and the law. It needs to be done by population. So, I mean, it gets even more skewed now as far as what, but my intent is to leave my home parish in it. If you want to send me out of here with just my home parish in this bill, send me out of this chamber. Leave me to be the lone sole one that takes any pride in the fact that I have a contractor or neighbor that's not being paid. So it reads as follows, and it's technically correct. Any parish with a population between 10,000 and 3,000 receiving shall be denied these provisions, shall be exempted out of it. So it's between 10,000 and 13,000, so I move this amendment.
All right, any questions on the amendment? On the amendment? Any objections to adoption of the amendment? Senator Adler, you want to ask him a question?
You ask me the question specifically.
Which one you putting in?
By what I understood from the staff is that it could not be specifically by parish. Okay, 10,000 and 10,300 according, so that it does that. So if you have a parish that's in there, it's going to fall underneath this. I mean, if I need to go back by and pass over this again and put something in there by name, we'll do that.
Well, then you and I need to visit just a minute. I voted against that First Amendment. And now when I've gone down the list, just about everybody's out, and you said you wanted to make sure Caldwell is in. That's what I heard you say. This amendment keeps Caldwell in. Okay. You've also picked up and kept in Webster and Claiborne. And so I have one last amendment for you. If we're going to send it out just with yours in there, I don't want to send it out here with part of mine in and part of mine out. And so I'm sitting here talking to you, did you know, so that they can get this amendment to get Webster and Claiborne out so we can send it out of here with yours in as you requested. I don't want to get caught in the trap after voting against that first one that some are in and some are out in my district. Don't want to do that.
And that's being drafted right now as far as time-wise? So listen, while we're visiting on that and we've got time to visit, when somebody does not pay their bills, when you have a local municipal government that doesn't pay their bills, is there anything when they don't pay their bills or anything that would allow them from going to a fine, nice restaurant, going and lobbying somebody, me or you, and spending tens of thousands, maybe going to Las Vegas and going seeing a show or whatever the case might be, while they got a final judgment out there that's not enforceable? Do you think there's anything there at this point in time that would restrict them from doing that?
Well, a moment ago you did an excellent job of giving me that list of people who have won these cases. You gave me one, I believe it was in East Baton Rouge, and somebody from the side came and grabbed me as soon as you said it. I don't know because I'm not familiar with the case, but this is what you said. Somebody filed suit for $700,000. They won the suit. East Baton Rouge didn't pay. What I'm now told is that the person who filed the suit and won the suit has done not millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of work with that government. Now, it is possible out of hundreds of millions, I guess you get into a dispute over 700,000, but it almost sounds like somebody's biting the hand that feeds it and now asking us to feed it some more.
I'd be glad to address that one. There's another case that's probably even larger than that that's going on this. Certainly no member here thinks that the corporation, biggest one here in the state, thinks that they go out and does all this electrical work and does it all by themselves. It goes back to the little man. This money ends up going to the little man at the end of the day. I mean, you're making, I understand what you're saying is that, sure, there's probably somewhere, but at the end of the day, there's an individual that needs the money, and you're slapping their hand and saying, no, I don't think so.
Well, I don't think there's any question that if someone does work and they're hiring people, ultimately it goes to some of them. But I don't think there's any doubt either that sometimes some of these people do the work. Some of it's going to make payments on the Lear jets and the alligator boots and the silk suits. I don't know how much is going back to the little guy, but I supported your bill when it came out of committee. I voted against the amendment. But I clearly don't want to get caught in the trap. If we're not doing this across the state, I want to make sure, at least in my area, where I don't know of this problem happening. I really don't. If I had seen it happen, then I'd be standing right here with a bill, I guess, myself. But I hadn't seen that happen. So with that said, I would ask you again, in an effort to give me enough time to get this amendment. Why don't you tell me exactly what made you decide to do this?
Senator Broom, you asked me that question in committee, did you not? Right when I was asked that question in committee, there was a portion of my upper part in the northeast corner where an individual was owed money, a contractor. And he would not be, they refused to pay him. For various reasons, they strung him out, but kept saying, why don't you keep on doing this because we're eventually going to pay you. You're so far into this project that we're going to pay you. Well, there came a certain point where that it was easier just to strike the slate clean with him, move on to somebody else with a fresh one. He had done all the back research work and bam, they moved on to somebody else.
Well, I clearly understand that, and I think you clearly have a right to debate it. The biggest problem we have, obviously, is the Constitution itself, much as we disagree with it, protects their interest, and instead of making a change to the Constitution, we're just reaching out to find something we can stop them from doing. I heard Senator Walsworth talk a statement about tort cases and whatnot, but even when the state of Louisiana gets sued, I mean, we have to go pass a judgment. We have to pass a piece of legislation to let people get paid. Local government gets to do the same thing. What's the difference between them doing the same thing we're doing? Well, why not let them do the same stuff we do?
And I'm glad you brought that up. I have a bill that'll come before committee. If this bill moves forward, I'll bring that to committee next committee meeting, and you can vote on that one.
You have a bill to do what?
I have a bill that you were saying what's the difference with the state and how come the state didn't do this for to keep the bill here where we could stay focused on it without getting so bogged down. I've got a bill coming through right now. If you move this bill, and I see there's no intention by the members who won't honor anything, and that's very disturbing to me. I mean, this whole process, and I know Senator Adler. I mean, any member in here has the right to disagree with me on this, but this really disturbs me. Maybe it doesn't disturb anybody else, but this is a sad part of the process right here.
Well, in your neck of the woods and mine, people pay their bills, and it's part of who we are. I certainly appreciate that. But we pay our bills, and we all act according to what law says we can and cannot do. And in this case, in their defense, they have followed what the Constitution allows them to do. And your effort is now to intervene and make some change without constitutionally changing it. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that? Do we have them? Senator, the staff now tells me that in the amendment that I voted against, my parishes were removed. I'm now out of the bill. You can go ahead and do whatever you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Adley.
All right, Senator Gallo, your question? All right, he waves. All right, on the amendment, anybody else? Any questions? Any objection to adoption of the amendment? The amendment stands adopted. All right, we're on the bill. Senator Adley, you wish the floor on the bill now? All right, Senator Gallo, you want to speak on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President, members. I reluctantly rise in opposition to the bill, and I certainly want to commend Senator Reiser for all of his hard work, although I'm not quite sure exactly what's being accomplished in the bill in its current form. You know, and I've spoken with the proponents and opponents on the other side of the rail about the bill, and I understand, and I think we all understand what they're trying to accomplish. I just don't know that this is the way to do it. And Senator Reiser, you know, is a very honorable man, and I know he's given his word. He's going to go forward with this bill, but I think at the end of the day, it really is not going to accomplish what he's setting out to do. Typically, when you get to the final judgments that this bill speaks about, they're many years after this whole the whole controversy begins, and typically your administrations have already changed out. You know, if you're talking 4, 5, 6 years by the time you get to a final judgment, so you could potentially have a new administration being saddled with bad acts of a prior administration. And that's not to say that anybody would condone not paying your bills. No, that's not it. But I think if they look at some sort of remedy on the front end, and I'd be happy to work with Senator Reiser and with anyone else to try and find a better fix to what has been characterized as a pretty isolated problem. I think there needs to be something maybe more so geared on the front end, be it more extensive bonds on the front end, or some sort of guarantee on the front end that would give the contractor something to go after. But I think trying to do this on the back end is not the way to do it. And again, I applaud his efforts, and I really hate to even come down and oppose it. But I think that, and again, I would pledge to Senator Reiser that I would be happy to work with him in trying to find a solution to this, because ultimately we don't want contractors to go unpaid. Certainly I don't want to. So I give him my word that after I vote against the bill, that I will work with him in the future to try and fix the problem.
All right, so you have another amendment now, Mr. Secretary?
Senator Adley sends up amendments. It's set number 2633, 2633.
And those amendments
I have
do
it
what,
this time. The staff was still looking at Idaho when they were looking through the list. They did find out that Webster and Claiborne were not out. This amendment does take Webster and Claiborne out, so we can get down to the area you have of interest, which is in Caldwell, as I understand it. I'd ask that you not object, and I'll take Webster and Claiborne out.
All right, sir. Senator Reiser, any objection? He objects. All right. The gentleman has sent up an amendment to which there is objection. When the machines are open, those in favor of the amendment will vote yes. Those opposed, no. Open up the machines, please. No. Vote your machines, please. Vote your machines. Are you through voting? All right, close them up, please. 26 yeas and 10 nays. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments, Mr. Secretary?
No more.
Senator Kostelka, you wish the floor on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief, members. When this bill came to committee, I worked with Senator Reiser, and I thought I helped him I was the one that put in the language about final judgment to make sure that we were talking about judgments that had been made final through the court process and due process, and of course that it was a contract, so not a tort, not an accident, which is something you can't predict how much it's going to be. So the government organization this bill would be limited to written contracts that they know going in what it amounts to. But we have emasculated and messed with this bill so much that it's ridiculous to try to sit up here and pass such a bill as this. And I would just ask that with common sense that we're going to have to vote against Senator Reiser's bill now. If we can work on something in the future, fine. But I don't know how we can pass this legislation at this point without looking ridiculous.
All right, so Senator Rozzi, you have a right to close. A couple of folks would like to ask you questions, if that's all right with you. Sure. Senator White, you want to ask Senator Rozzi a question?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to commend you. I know you did a lot of work on this bill. I had questions, real life. You and I both served on Homeland Security. And being from the south part of the state and the chairman in the House for the last 4 years, I had many occasions after catastrophes to go meet with parish governments and city governments as they were trying to rebuild and clean up their city or parish. They were often meetings with the Corps of Engineers, with FEMA, with GOSEP, and they were small governments, many of them. All they knew is they wanted to clean their parish or their town. And so they were given a direction how to do it and to sign a contract. But in some cases, they had no idea that FEMA might come back and disqualify it for different reasons. And I spent a bunch of time with this, where your parish or your city, it may be okay to go into this drainage ditch or this canal and clean this area, but in my parish or another parish, the same folks, the Corps of FEMA says, you should have got Corps of Engineers permits before you've done that, and we're going to disqualify that, so you don't get credit for that $1 million worth of work. Those are the things that concern me. And if you get burdened with a big bill like that that doesn't qualify, and it depends who you get that's monitoring your work and who you get as a FEMA rep. And some of them are contract. I think they're FEMA people and they're actually contractors. They say they're FEMA and they're here today and gone tomorrow. And if you get a big judgment like that and at some point you try to pay it off, and if we pass this and you can't even borrow money to bond to pay your debt off and you're a small parish or city, how would you pay it off?
It goes back to what Senator Adley came back with his question. There's an exemption in here in the bill on page 1, line 14. And if you could be more specifically and clear where there is a judgment with someone that you're referencing to on that, I mean, there was on-site, and I agree with you on the FEMA part, but there was on-site checked off there, and there's on-site everywhere else. And were any of these monies, the FEMA money, come to the contractor, have the ability to sell part or partial of it, or did it was it denied? Or I mean, what specifically occurred in the situation you're speaking of?
They just I've seen them deny big payments, and I'm talking about millions of dollars. And you can appeal it, and it can go on for years. And I agree 100% that hurts the company. The company did the work, or maybe they didn't do all the work that they said they did. There's always the argument over it. And there's checks and balances, and the state kind of takes the position until we sign off on, until FEMA signs off on it, then we're not going to pay it, where the parish or the city, municipality is stuck with it if at the end of the day they don't pay for it, and they're not going to be able to sit out there and monitor the work the whole time. Okay? So that's my concern. It's not the didn't pay $200,000 or didn't pay your bill or on a road project or a RFQ to buy products or something like that. I say pay your bill if you get a final judgment. I've always paid mine. But it's the huge obligations that could happen through all the disasters we have in this state, whether it be tornadoes or ice storms in the north or hurricanes in the south or floods. I mean, we have them every year with something. And if that's what concerns me, if those don't get paid, then this municipality or parish is stuck with a bill. They can't even borrow money to pay their obligation.
I'll ask again, can you specifically direct me to one of those cases like that or not?
Well, I can give you the one to Livingston's still in litigation. I don't know if they have a final judgment, but if they ever do get in that final judgment and they have to pay $40 or $50 million, that would be 5 to 10 years of their total budget. That would be like the state having a $50 billion debt and try to pay it.
You're aware that FEMA did send Livingston Parish some money and they sent it back, or are you not aware of that?
I am aware that they sent it, but they were going to disqualify part of it. And just like I've heard other people come to this mic and say, the people of that parish, it's not their fault. They've changed governments, parish president and council, but they would still be strapped with that new obligation.
Well, we just disagree on the fact of a previous administration not being liable. I mean, that's just something we just have to disagree in principle on.
I agree. I just wanted you to understand. I know you've worked on it, and I would just say, it's a parish here close now that I still have a little bit of representation, but I was in those meetings when they laid out how to do it, and then some of it was disqualified, and the local governments got in arguments on back and forth over it, and it's not my fault or your fault or the contractor's fault. But I don't see how, if they can't borrow money, how they would ever pay it off.
There's a clause, line 1, page 14, where they can borrow money.
Thank you, sir.
See a question, Mr. President?
Dr. Thompson for a question. He's still with us. Dr. Thompson, you have a question? He passes.
Auto amendment.
Any further discussion? Senator Rossi, you have a right to close.
Remember, we've heard remarks, and I'm not going to hammer it out very much longer, but the fact is that, well, if we can come back with some kind of remedy that addresses this, would you really vote for that? Would you come back, or would you listen to and say, we just want the deal we got now? Do you really think they're going to relinquish the deal they have now, and you're going to hear a different argument next year? Because I'm going to bring it to you. You vote this down, I'm going to work with everybody that said they're going to work with me, and that'll be put to the test. But mark my words, and we'll replay this again. So I want this to be clear that there will be opposition from the people that have called you today, will call you next year and tell you to vote against any kind of legislation that enforces them and requires them to pay their bills. Mr. President, I move final passage.
All right, the gentleman now moves final passage of his bill. When the machines are open, those in favor vote yes, opposed no. Secretary, open the machines, please. Senator Rossi, yes. Vote your machines, please. Vote your machines. Senator Peterson, no. Peterson, no. You through voting? All right, close them up. 27 yeas and 12 nays. The bill found a passage. Gentlemen, reconsider vote. Bill proper. Motion on table. Yes, sir. So, Senator Rossi, you want to tell them about capital outlay and stuff?
Personal privilege. I was not. It's just coincidence I was holding this red pen. Members, thank you for hearing the debate, and I respect all of your opinion. And